when you start one of these companies, it's typically not the case that you get the whole idea fully formed, instantaneously. We certainly, there was this incredible internet boom going on in Silicon Valley in the late 90s. It felt that there was sort of this open frontier, open gold rush. One of the natural things to look at was finance. I was sort of very interested in the cryptocurrency. Could there be new forms of money? There's always something, super mysterious, powerful, important about money, and was there a way that this was going to change? So I think we had this general idea to do something with security, with money, with payments from very early on of the founding of the company, and then you iterate a lot on how to get the idea out. And the critical question for any consumer internet product is always not what the idea is, but how do you get it out? How do you get the distribution out? And there've been a lot of payments companies, internet payments companies that already started and failed by 1998. There was one called, there was CyberCash. There were, there's sort of a variety of these different ones that had tried to create these, comprehensive currency schemes, and they would work if everybody used them, but you could never get even the first person to start. And so
right.
The challenge was how to make it viral. How do you get something to work where it's good for the first person, for the 10th person, for the 100th person? Once you have millions of people, you have a network, you have network effects. And that was sort of the chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, so how did you guys overcome that hurdle?
Well, we eventually stumbled on this idea of linking money with email, because there were already 300 million people in '99 that had email accounts. And so if you could send money to an email address, I'd send it to your email, and then you get an email saying you've received cash, and then you'd obviously click on the links and do the work necessary to get the money out. And so you didn't need both counterparts to a transaction to be part of the PayPal network. Only the sender could be part of it, and then the recipient would sign up as they took the money out. And then we started with the 24 people in our office. Those were the first 24 customers. And they sent money to friends and to other people. We gave these referral bonuses. We gave you $10 if you signed up, and $10 if you got someone to sign up. And it just grew exponentially. When we were, it grew about 7 to 10% compounding daily. And
wow.
If you're, and even if you start with a small number, if you can get 7 to 10% daily compounding, after about a month, you're at 1,000 people. By that was mid-November of '99. By end of December of '99, it was at 12,000. By February 3rd, 2000, it was at 100,000. By mid-April 2000, it was up to 1 million. And so
what did you do in terms of getting people to understand the way you could work with money differently?
Normally, you sort of, to get people to start doing something like that, it has to be something where there's an intense need, and maybe it's not too dangerous. And so one of the natural places it started was on the eBay auction site, where you had small dollar transactions, maybe $40 for the typical amount, and if you send check across the country, that's like a 7 to 10 day delay. It's slow. Most people aren't set up to process credit cards. There are like 150 million people with emails in the US at the time, and there may be 3 million that were set up to process credit cards, small businesses, things like that. So we expanded it by 147 million.
Do you remember what it felt like as it started compounding the way you're talking about?
Well,
like what it felt like as it was growing and you realized, like, wow, we really have this thing.
Well,
now.
you're at the forefront of like some sort of revolutionary thing. It's incredibly exciting, and it's incredibly scary. And it was like we're going to take over the world, or we're all going to die. And you move several times between those two several times a day.
Yeah. Was there any bizarre pushback from banks or anyone that was doing financial transactions traditionally?
There were certainly like more than our share of challenges. You had an enormous problem of fraud, where people just figured out ways to hack the system and steal money. And then and you can't simply get rid of fraud, because you can always get rid of fraud if you make it cumbersome. But if it's easy, then it's also easy to defraud. And so the challenge was, how do you get it to be easy to use but hard to defraud? And that took some time. There certainly banks didn't like it. There were all the incumbent players that didn't like something new. And then of course it was sort of in this strange regulatory zone where it was a new form of payments, a new form of moving money, and the way I often thought of it at the time was that we were in a race between technology and politics, and the politicians didn't like us, But if we got the system, the PayPal network, to be big enough, it would sort of overwhelm the regulators, and they'd have to accept it as a fait accompli. One of the execs at PayPal said that we need to hire a whole bunch of lawyers to tell us what we can do or can't do. And no, we're not going to hire them. They'll tell us what we can't do. So we have to just go ahead and not hire the lawyers and just do it.
Yeah.
Now, the sort of I do not know if a company like PayPal could have been started even 2-3 years later. So in the aftermath of 9/11, we got the Patriot Act in the U.S. and that attached much more regulatory scrutiny to financial transactions, to payments. The know your customer rules became much trickier, and so I do think that there's a weird way in which there was an opening to start a business like PayPal in 1999, 2000. Even 3 years later, I think it might not have been possible.
Yeah.